Welcome to this service of Lament, a time set apart to look squarely at the reality of suffering and despair, at the plain and ugly fact of the brokenness of our world and of humanity, and not to look away, not to gloss it over with a glib phrase or an easy joke or a thin optimism, but simply to let it stand and bear witness to the reality of suffering. We do this tonight with music and silence, with poetry and news reports. This is, in truth, only half a service. It's incomplete without the Easter service that follows 2 days from now, a service of hope reborn. Just as the suffering and death of Jesus symbolize the universal and continuous reality of our lives, so too the Easter story symbolizes the reality of a universal and a continuous rebirth of hope, of love. Love wins, but not without passing through a long and a difficult darkness. Tonight we sit in that hollow place. As the service progresses, the candles are extinguished one by one, the music fades, and in the end we remain behind, left in the final minutes of darkness and unanswered silence. I invite you to leave then at the very end, whenever you're ready to leave in silence and in solitude, and to carry this hollowness in vigil to Easter morning. Why gather for this service? A friend explains it this way. They say, we are here to guard against the great lie which our culture relentlessly feeds us, that the purpose and meaning of human life is to be happy. It is an innocent lie fed to us by people who would profit from our innocence. But our purpose is to overcome the muggy, mindless haze of everyday life. We seek to develop a sensitivity to the reality of other people with their sorrows and struggles. We seek to cultivate the spiritual maturity to confront and deeply engage suffering and death. It is only then that we can truly give ourselves over to joy and laughter and pause in the face of the nearly imperceptible radiance of the ordinary. When we remember and retell, as we will at the very end, the story of Jesus crucified on this Good Friday, not abstractly or symbolically or metaphorically, but as the physical torture and execution of a man whose call to radical love threatened the foundation of empire. When we retell that story, we do it remembering that suffering is an inescapable reality of living. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached these words 2 years before his murder. He said, Sunday after Sunday, week after week, people come to God's church with broken hearts. They need a word of hope, and the church has an answer. If it doesn't, it's not a church. But the church must say in substance that brokenheartedness is a fact of life, that Good Friday is a fact of life, that failure is a fact of life. Good Friday is as much a fact of life as Easter. Failure is as much a fact of life as success. Disappointment is as much a fact of life as fulfillment. And the church must tell us, take up your burden. Take up your grief and look at it. Don't run from it.
Texas woman asks court to allow her abortion. New York Times, December 2023. I thought I would never need an abortion, Kate Cox told an interviewer in Houston. I want a big family. Ms. Cox said that she and her husband had been excited at the prospect of a third child, joining their 3-year-old daughter and their 1-year-old son. The couple barely followed the rapidly shifting legal landscape around abortion in Texas as Roe was overturned and bans went into effect. When Ms. Cox was 20 weeks pregnant, her fetus was diagnosed with trisomy 18, a condition that in all but very rare cases leads to miscarriage, stillbirth, or the death of the infant within the first year after birth. Despite trips to the emergency room for pain and discharge, Ms. Cox, age 31, a mother of 2 young children who lives in the Dallas area, was told by doctors that she is required to continue her pregnancy under Texas law. Texas outlaws abortions from the point of fertilization and allows private citizens to sue others who might help a woman obtain an abortion. The laws allow some exceptions to save the health and life of the pregnant person, but what that means and when it protects her doctor was unclear. We knew abortion was illegal in Texas, Mr. Cox said, but not how limited the exceptions were. We had no idea the scope of that. In the middle of her pregnancy, still coming to terms with the diagnosis, Kate had to sue the state of Texas to provide legal protection to her doctor. Governor Greg Abbott and other proponents of the state's strict abortion bans have said that the bans already allow for doctors to perform abortions in cases where the mother's life is at risk. Lawyers for the state said that an abortion could be performed if a patient had received a fatal fetal diagnosis and was facing serious health risks. The diagnosis of trisomy 18 was devastating. The fetus would not survive until birth, or, if carried to term, the infant would die within a short time. That feeling was compounded, said Kate, by her inability to end the pregnancy despite her doctors telling her that continuing it could endanger her own health. Ms. Cox delivered her previous pregnancies by C-section, and the doctors have told her that the risk of scarring from a third C-section could threaten her chances of having another child. It's deep sadness, she said. I feel like I should not have to put my body through the risks of continuing this pregnancy through a childbirth and induction with the chance of uterine rupture, a third C-section, for a fetus that will not survive. But Kate's doctors could not give her the care she needed until the courts decided it was necessary. The Texas Supreme Court disagreed that Kate's case counted as an exception, and on December 8th, stopped her from receiving care in that state. In a Dark Time by Christine Valters Paintner. Do not rush to make meaning. When you smile and say, "What purpose?" this all serves. You deny grief. A room inside you. You turn from thousands who cross into the great night alone. From mourners aching to press one last time against the warm flesh of their beloved. From the wailing that echoes in the empty room. When you proclaim who caused this, I say pause, rest in the dark silence. First, before you contort your words to fill the hollowed out cave. Remember, the soil will one day receive you back too. Sit where sense has vanished. Control has slipped away, with futures unraveled, where every drink tastes bitter, despite our thirst. When you wish to give a name to that which haunts us, you refuse to sit with the woman who walks the hospital hallway, hears the beeping stop again and again, with the man perched on a bridge over the rushing river. Do not let your handful of light sting the eyes of those who have bathed in darkness.
Tears fall from doth but shame disclose. Never may my woes be revered, since pity is fed, and tears and sighs and groans, my weary days, my weary days, all joys have deprived. From the highest smile of contentment, my fortune is thrown, and fear and grief and pain for my deserts, all my hopes, since hope is gone. Hark, you shadows that in darkness dwell, learn to condemn light. Happy they that in hell feel not the world's despite. Hark, you shadows that in darkness dwell, learn to condemn light. Happy, happy they that in hell feel not the world's despite.
Thousands of Feet Below You by Alice Walker. Thousands of feet below you, there is a small boy running from your bombs. If he were to show up at your mother's house on a green sea island off the coast of Georgia, he'd be invited in for dinner. Now, driven, you have shattered his bones. He lies steaming in the dirt. In 50 or 60 or maybe 100 oily, slimy bits. If you survive and return to your island home and your mother's gracious table where the cup of loving kindness overflows the brim and from which no one in memory was ever turned, gather yourself, set a place for him. Ukraine's stolen children. New York Times, December 27th, 2023. On October 6th, 2022, schools in Kherson in southern Ukraine, occupied by Russia, suddenly announced trips for all school children to camps in Crimea. Denis Berezhny, then 17, was told by his school principal that he had to go, and agreed, he said, to avoid bringing trouble on his parents. In the wartime conditions of Russian occupation, few in Kherson knew that the children made to leave would not be permitted to return. Denis is one of thousands of Ukrainian children forcibly separated from their parents by the Russian authorities in the early stages of the war in Ukraine, now 2 years old. Authorities told parents it was a vacation, children's recreation, not deportation. Anastasia Bondarenko, age 14, explained they didn't want to bring us back here. They said it wouldn't be safe here. In the camps, lessons were in Russian. Children were shown Russian films, taught Russian history, told to forget their Ukrainian nationality. They were told that they would face reprisals back in Ukraine for going to the Russian side. They were told that their parents did not want them. Konstantin 10, age 15, said, "We were told that everything was bombed here. There was no grain, no food." Some were kids wounded or orphaned in bombardments on Ukrainian towns and villages. Some were left homeless and alone after parents were detained. Others were separated from families who believed their children were going to summer camp. Sergio Orlov, age 12, said, "I missed my home and my parents." The strategy was deliberate, premeditated, and systematic, according to the accounts of dozens of children and their families, as well as evidence collected by Ukrainian and international human rights and war crimes organizations. The exceptional scale and duration of the effort has little comparison in modern warfare. Of the more than 19,000 children taken, over recent months, relatives have been able to track down and bring home 387. The Times interviewed dozens of these children who had made it back home. Mahartia Matunina was 8 when she was sent to a Russian camp by local officials around the time of the mass transfer to Crimea while staying with her father. Her mother, Veronika Cymbolar, did not know where she was for 4 months. Mahartia played happily with her sister and brother in their one-room apartment in the Mykolaiv region as her mother spoke. But she burrowed her head in the sofa when the interviewer asked how her time in the camp had been. She wants to forget it like a bad dream, her mother said. Kirilo Sakalo crossed and uncrossed his legs uncomfortably during an interview alongside his mother and grandmother and barely looked up from his cell phone. He said he'd plotted to run away from the summer camp in Crimea when he was told he couldn't go home. Tell them about the water, his mother prompted. Don't remind me, he said. Staff at the camp had thrown water on him then 11 to wake him up in the mornings. Anastasia and Ksenia Honcharova, sisters, spent more than 7 months at several camps in southern Russia. Anastasia barely spoke, her eyes locked in a distant stare. While Ksenia described their time there, Anastasia was 11, Ksenia was 10. Tell them, her mother encouraged Anastasia. You were the one who cried the most on the phone. But it was too much for Anastasia. She left the room without a word and came back silent, cuddling one of the family's pet dogs.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone, a long way from home, a long way from home.
Gaza's shadow death toll. Bodies buried beneath the rubble. March 23rd, The New York Times. A curly-haired young man shakes as he bends over the mound of smashed concrete that used to be his friend's home. He clutches his rain-spotted iPhone in his trembling hands, but there is no answer. Please, Ahmed, he sobs in a video posted on social media. Please, God. A father crawls over a mountain of gray concrete shards, his right ear pressed to the dust. I can't hear you, love, he tells his absent children in a different video shared on Instagram and verified by the New York Times. He scrabbles over a few yards to try again. Salma, Saeed, he yells, hitting his dusty hammer against the mute concrete over and over before breaking down. Saeed, he cries, didn't I tell you to take care of your sister? Another man, on another rubble heap, is looking for his wife and his children, Rahaf, age 6, and Aboud, age 4. Rahaf, he cries, leaning forward to scan the twisted pile of gray before him. What has she done to deserve this? Gaza has become a 140 square foot mile graveyard. Each destroyed building another jagged tomb for those still buried within. The most recent health ministry estimate for the number of people missing in Gaza is about 7,000, but that figure has not been updated since November. Gaza and aid officials say thousands more have most likely been added to that toll in the weeks and months since then. Some were buried too hastily to be counted. Others lie decomposing in the open, in places too dangerous to be reached, or have simply disappeared amid the fighting, the chaos, and ongoing Israeli detentions. The rest, in all likelihood, remain trapped under the rubble. The piles of debris have been multiplying ever since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, killing about 1,200 people, according to Israeli officials. Israel launched its retaliatory war, and the number of search and rescue operations, both professional and increasingly amateur, also soared. After airstrikes, a small crowd of would-be rescuers gathers. In Instagram videos like the ones described above, the searchers, a mix of professional civil defense workers, family members, and neighbors, can be seen clambering over and onto the dusty wreckage of homes and buildings to dig. But hopes dwindle quickly. The people they are looking for are usually found dead beneath the wreckage, days, weeks, or even months later. The buried make up a shadow death toll in Gaza, a leaden asterisk to the health ministry's official tally of more than 31,000 dead, and an open wound for families who hope against hope for a miracle. Most families have accepted that their missing are dead, and it is unclear how much of the estimate of those unaccounted for is already reflected in the official death toll. The continuing shelling, crossfire, and airstrikes often make it too dangerous to sift through the wreckage for their bodies. Other times, relatives are too far away to do so, having separated from the rest of their families in search of somewhere safer to go. Photographs that have emerged of Gaza's rubble heaps testify to families' intention to recover the dead someday. Omar al-Riyati and Osama Badawi are under the rubble, reads the spray paint on a tarp draped across the floor of one blown-out building. 40 days my family has been under the rubble and we can't reach them, Salem Qassem said in November. He had fled to Beit Hanun in northern Gaza for nearby Jabalia earlier in the war, 4 days before he heard that his father was dead. He rushed back to Beit Hanun as soon as he could, he said, to find his father's 3-story house had been reduced to rubble. The people who had been there, his father's wife, his sisters, and his brothers, were nowhere to be found. He tried to dig, he said, but fled when the neighborhood became under renewed attack. Now, even if he could get past the Israeli military still operating in the area, he said, I won't find bodies. I'll find ashes.
The Gospel according to Mark chapter 15. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they've brought against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. And then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have them release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They struck his head with a reed, spat on him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. At 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That call still echoes, unanswered, in hospital rooms and empty schools in Kherson, under the rubble of Gaza, and in our own ears.